Hey team, welcome to another Bullpen Bulletin with Coach Hart and Building Better Baseball. Today is the part 2 of the Flow of the Season coaching workshop. And today we are talking about everything that you should be teaching in early season. So we're focusing on early season and everything you should teach and be doing in the early season to prepare yourself for the rest of the season. So let's get into it. And remember, I'm Coach Hart. This is Building Better Baseball. This is the best place for baseball education. So let's dive into the Flow of the Season coaching workshop, part 2, early season. So the first one is the breakdown. All right, so the breakdown of this training or of this workshop is each one is broken up by month. Okay, now these are based on a 3-month season and there's about 4 weeks in a month, right? So that's about 8 practices. So going through these next 3 parts, make sure that you think about 8 practices. So take what applies to you and leave what doesn't. I know that some of these things might not apply to you as a coach, but whatever you can take and that applies to you, just take it and then just leave the rest, okay? Now, let's talk about your goals for the season. So obviously goals are super important for life in general, but especially for baseball. Make sure that your goals in the early season are in your control. All right, so your goals for early season should be everything that you or your players can control. All right, you want to get quick wins to build confidence in your team. All right, so in the beginning of the season, it's super important to build that motivation and build that confidence. So make sure that all of your goals that you set for your team are in your control. And I'll give a couple examples in a little bit. So what do you control? All right, one of your goals could be the number of errors in a game. Your team controls that if they make an error or not an error, right? So that could be a goal for the season or goal for a game in your early season is having a limited number of errors, like 3 errors per game or less. All right. The number of walks in a game. So your pitchers, they control if they throw strikes or not, right? They can't control if the kids hit it. They can't control if they give up runs, but they can control if they throw strikes and if they walk. Now, we're not talking about umpires who have a really super small zone and they're kind of squeezing your pitcher, right? We're talking about let's just pretend that we have a regular umpire with a regular zone. Your pitchers can control if they throw strikes or not. So one of your goals for the early season could be the number of walks in a game. Hustle. Everybody controls their own hustle. If there's one thing that you absolutely can control, it's your hustle. Flying around the field, make sure you're jogging to everywhere you go. When you go in for a new inning, make sure you run out to the field. After an inning, make sure you run off of the field. Just having that hustle mentality and act and looking like you want to be there. Look like you want to be there and make sure your team looks like they want to be there no matter the result of the game because you can't control that, right? But you can control your hustle. Attendance at practice. So I know you don't fully have control of this, but this could be one of your goals if you want like 90% attendance at every practice, all right? Proper execution of plays and duties. So every player on the field on the defense has a job and you have plays, right? First and third plays, bunt plays, whatever. The proper execution, whether they result in an out or not, is in your control. So if you're thinking about goals that you can control, this could be one of them. Just have proper execution of the plays no matter the result. And the last one, playing time. So this is specifically for you as a coach, is you can control how much playing time each kid gets. And maybe your goal is to have everybody play a certain number of positions or a certain number of innings, or make sure that the kids who want to pitch get out there and pitch, right? You can control that. So having these goals of something that you can control is super powerful in the beginning of the season because it kind of sets up that confidence and motivation like we talked about before. So make sure we write these goals down so we can build on it throughout the season. Now, what to teach? You always want to start broad in the early season. You want to cover things in a broad sense, and you're going to kind of hone in on those things as you get further in the season, right? Now, you want to focus your first practices on season-long things, right? Things that are going to go throughout the season, such as routines. You want to go over all of your routines, every routine that you have, your warm-up routine, right? And that's what I say here, your warm-up routine. That's going to be the same every single time for each practice and each game. So make sure that in the early season, you teach your routines so that your team knows it throughout the season. And in the mid-season and late season, you don't have to go over that anymore. All right. So arrival and dismissal processes. So when they arrive to practice, what is the routine? When they dismiss, how do you all dismiss games? How do you all dismiss practices? Do you all have a meeting? Do you all just disperse and say bye? So what is that routine? What is your process of doing basically as they arrive and as they dismiss? So make sure you cover that in the early season practices. All right. Your dugout or game routines, right? So how does the dugout work? Do you have a board that you write everything on and they can refer to that for their positioning, right? How does the dugout rules, do you have dugout rules? Everything that applies to the dugout, especially in the game, all of those routines that you want the kids to do, like get foul balls or whatever, that should be taught in the early season so that they know it throughout the season, right? Expectations. So expectations need to be set at the very first practice. Very first practice. And for your parents, like we talked about in the previous part, in the first part of the preseason, the parents' expectations are set in the preseason parent meeting, right? Make sure you set all of your expectations in the first or second practice so that you and your players are on the exact same page of what is expected. All right? So expectations. Plays. So first and third plays, make sure you get these plays in the early season so you have them throughout the season, right? First and third plays, they could be as simple as, throwing it down to second base. Play 2 is not throwing. Play 3 is throwing it back to the pitcher, right? Something simple like that. Just make sure you have your whatever plays that you're calling, make sure you do it in the early season, all right? Bunt plays. Do you have bunt plays, right? So simple bunt plays, make sure that these kind of plays are done in the early season, all right? Signs. So base running signs, make sure you do those in the early season so they know it throughout the whole entire, season, right? So because they're going to be the same, you might change them, but they're probably going to be the same throughout the season. So make sure you do those in the first few practices. And pitching signs if they apply, right? So I know some coaches, they don't give pitching signs, some do. So if you do give them and you like to do that, make sure you do that in the beginning of the season, all right? And I know some of this might sound a little obvious, but this is to really get your focus on these specific things, and just so you don't fill the time with something else that's unnecessary in the early season, right? So make sure you do get all of these things done in the early season, so that way your mid-season and your late season, you have time to do everything else, right? You don't want to fill the late season and mid-season teachings in the early season and miss these things, right? Because these are the things that will last throughout the season. All right, continuing on. Now, talking about your list that we made from the first part, you listed out everything that you want to teach, right? You're going to take your list of everything you want to teach and you're going to break them into buckets of topics, such as infield work, right? Team defense, pitching, outfield work, things like that, right? You're going to list them in order of importance for success. So what is the most vital thing that will contribute to your success as a coach and as a team? You're going to list them 1 to whatever, right? You're going to list them by importance of your success. You'll teach the most vital topics in the early season. So this early season is your time to teach the most vital things that have to do with your success, such as how to run a rundown, right? So rundowns are super important to get people out, and it's a high percentage chance that the defense can get that runner out between the bases only if they know how to do a rundown, right? Talking about cutoffs, right? Going out and learning how to do cutoffs, right? So those are super important team defensive aspects of the game that need to happen in the early season so that your kids know it going through the season, and that will help you build success throughout the season. When teaching these skills, make sure you start broad with the 3 core elements. So this is more focusing on skill work, right? Such as hitting, right? If you're going through a swing, the 3 big core elements are the setup, the load, and the swing, right? In pitching, it could be the setup, the leg lift, and then you go down, throw the ball, right? Just keep it broad and keep it simple for these kids in the early season, right? Because you all, especially if you're a first-time coach, you're still getting used to each other and everything like that. So you want to start them off and give them quick wins where they can fully understand. And this is laying the foundation for you to teach more in-depth concepts throughout the rest of the season. So whenever you're teaching skills, make make sure that you start broad with like 3 or 4 core elements of the skill so that you can build on that foundation throughout the season. All right. Now, the last thing is keep it simple. The last thing you want to do in the early season is overcomplicate things for you and your team, like and your parents, your coaches. You don't want to make anything complicated in the early season, right? You want to keep it simple. Keep it simple. All right. You're laying the foundation for a successful season. Make sure you make it easy on yourself, make it easy on your team to be successful. You don't want to kind of lay down all of these like extravagant goals or all of these extravagant practice plans where they can't really understand it. If you have too much in your practice plan and you can't get it done, you feel defeated, right? You don't want all that. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. This is the early season. This is the first 6 to 8 practices, right? You want to cover all of these things that we talked about in this lesson, and we're going to build off of it. This is your foundation that you're laying for a successful season, all right? Now, the last thing is always have the word fun in your mind when you're creating your practice plans. How can you add a touch of fun in everything that you do? This is the essence of being a kid, all right? Having fun is the essence of being a kid, and we need to embrace that. And also, this will help just all around. This will help attendance at your practices because the kids know that the practice is going to be fun. This kind of lifts everybody's energy up, including the coaches. Everybody's having fun. You're learning baseball. You're getting better and you're improving. It improves the camaraderie between you and your teammates, right? Just add a little spark or a little sprinkle of fun in everything that you do, and I promise you, you will be a successful team, and your team will want to stay with you. I know that there's one thing in travel baseball where there are kids just hopping around from team to team because they're looking for the best team or the team that wins the most, right? That's not always the most important thing, right? Most likely, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the experience, having fun with your teammates, your coaches. And if you instill that and lay that as the foundation, then you will keep your team and you will grow from a young age all the way through up until high school. All right. And that is a winning and successful team. Because if that happens, then the wins will come. So hopefully you found this valuable. And like I said, this is the early season. This is the first about 6 or 8 practices, the first 4 weeks of the season. I will see you next week. Next week is the part 3 for mid-season. Everything that we're going to build off this video, we're going to move into mid-season, and we're going to talk about everything that you need to do and teach in the mid-season of your baseball season, right? So hopefully you found this valuable. Before you go, grab your free guide linked below. I have a whole bunch of them down there. I have a 2-hour practice plan. Just grab whatever. I made them for you for free. So feel free to grab what you like. And remember, I'm Coach Hart. This is Building Better Baseball, the best place for baseball education. And I will see you next week in part 3, mid-season coaching workshop.